Hello, everyone. My name is Carrie Martin. I'm the Environmental Sustainability Planner here at the New Jersey Institute of Technology, Technical Assistance to Brownfield Communities Program, also known as NJIT TAB. Welcome to today's TAB Talks, from Brownfields to Greenways. As always, we're excited to have you all here today, and thank you for taking time out of your day to spend it with us. To make sure we're all on the same page, let's refer to the EPA definition of brownfields. A brownfield is defined as real property, the expansion, redevelopment, or reuse of which may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of hazardous substances, pollutants, contaminants, controlled substances, petroleum products, or is mine-scarred land. It's important to note that not all contaminated sites are brownfields, and not all brownfields are contaminated. For instance, an active gas station that experiences a leaking underground storage tank is contaminated but is not necessarily a brownfield. A property containing a closed auto repair facility is a brownfield. This now vacant facility previously handled petroleum and chemicals, so there may be contamination. However, it could show through testing that the land isn't necessarily contaminated, but the stigma and perception of potential contamination still remains. Brownfields are legacies of our industrial past. Typical brownfield sites include historic factories and warehouses, former textile mills, mills and foundries, rails and freight yards. That said, non-industrial brownfield sites can include closed gas stations and auto repair facilities, former dry cleaners, and dump sites. These smaller businesses also use and handle chemicals. Buildings can also be considered brownfields based on the nature of the materials used to build them, such as asbestos or lead paint. Let's briefly talk about the negative impacts of brownfield sites, outside of the potential presence of contamination. Of course, environmental exposure to contamination can degrade soil, water, and air quality, and human exposure can potentially cause public health issues. But brownfields can also contribute to neighborhood deterioration and negative perceptions of the neighborhood. They can attract vandals, open dumping, or other unwanted criminal activity. They can lower property values, reduce employment opportunities, and lead to lost tax revenue and limited economic growth. But having brownfield sites comes with some advantages. Many are located along waterways and rail lines and within central downtown areas, making their locations advantageous for redevelopment. On the left-hand side of your screen, you can see the locations of both the NJDEP Future Greenway at the top and the Chattahoochee River lands at the Chattahoochee Brick Company site at the bottom. Major assets like old rail lines, waterways, major highways, and existing parks and golf courses circle these sites and serve as assets to attract redevelopment. Many brownfields already have existing infrastructure on or servicing the site, like utility and sewer lines. Brownfields may also hold historical and architectural significance. At the top, you can find the beautiful architecture of Tiffany Manor in Newark, New Jersey. Julia will talk about NJDEP's Greenway and will highlight this piece of architecture. Later, Jessica will go into the history behind the Chattahoochee Brick site. Most of all, brownfields hold the potential for being transformed into community assets. Remediation and redevelopment of brownfields present us with opportunities for renewal. A greenway is generally a linear park or open space corridor that links natural, cultural, and scenic resources. Greenways are found along rivers and on former rail lines. In addition to conserving land, greenways can also promote recreation through walking and cycling that encourages folks to get outside and be active. Environmental benefits of greenways include improved air and water quality. Rails to Trails projects, which convert abandoned rail lines into recreational pathways, are popular across the country. To tell us more about their Greenway projects, let's kick this conversation over to our panelists. It's my pleasure to briefly introduce today's panelists in the order that they will be presenting. Julia Wong works in the Office of Urban State Parks and Initiatives at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, where she manages and supervises the planning, design, and construction of the state's newest park, the Greenway. Additionally, Julia supports the Liberty State Park revitalization efforts. Christine Hassell is the Chattahoochee Program Project Manager for the Trust for Public Land. Currently, she is managing the development of the Camp and Paddle Trail, connecting 48 miles of the Chattahoochee River through 5 sites. When complete in spring 2025, the trail will provide a unique 4-day, 3-night recreational experience through the southern Atlanta metropolitan area. Jessica Lavandier has worked for several local governments in the Atlanta region and is currently an assistant director in the Office of Zoning and Development in the City of Atlanta's Department of City Planning. She manages the City of Atlanta's Brownfield program, which is funded by EPA grants, including assessment grants, a cleanup grant, and a revolving loan fund grant. Now it's my pleasure to kick this conversation over to Julia Wong.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name, as Carrie mentioned, is Julia Wong. I work for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, and I have the absolute honor of being the project manager for New Jersey's newest state park. It was an old abandoned rail line that we are in the process of transforming from a brownfield into a greenway. So without further ado, I have so much content to get through. All right, so to ground you a little bit to where we're working right now, so the Greenway Future State Park is converting an old rail line into a greenway, as Carrie had mentioned. So from west to east, it'll run about 9 miles through 2 counties and 8 municipalities. In total, once we rebuild and remediate everything, we're looking at approximately 140 acres of brownfields to be transformed into open space for active and passive recreation. This area specifically will serve 1.5 million people directly in the immediate surrounding area. But like all of our beloved state parks, we expect many more visitors to come to that area. These 2 counties are 2 of the most densely populated, it is one of the most densely populated areas in our state. And as you might know, New Jersey is the most densely populated state. So between the outdoor recreation and alternative transportation opportunities this will offer, we will service over 16% of New Jersey's population within the immediate surrounding area. Also, as you all know, this brownfield redevelopment will serve as a catalyst for both environmental improvements and economic development in all of the adjacent communities. So quickly with a little bit of our history. So DEP purchased this alignment from Norfolk Southern in August of 2022 for just over $60 million using a combination of federal and state funds. This absolutely would not have been possible if it hadn't been for all of our partners working on this, advocating for this for years before we were even involved. From local politicians all the way up to the state level, we have nonprofits, philanthropic organizations, local businesses, anyone that you can name, the Girl Scouts even, we're clamoring for something to be done with this brownfield site to be redeveloped into an asset. So we were blessed with the opportunity in 2022 and very quickly got to work in 2023, starting research, analysis, and our initial engagement. From that work, we came out with 4 reports, one focused on remediation, another on stormwater, one on safety and security, and the last one focused on phase development of how to tackle those 9 miles while staying actively engaged with all of our stakeholders and communities. Building from those 4 reports, which we'll talk about how we got there, we ended up picking what will be phase 1 and moved into design and engagement at the end of 2023, which is where we are now. Engagement continued throughout that process and still actively continues, though we're at a bit of a pause as we, fingers crossed everybody, hopefully break ground this summer. Very excited for this to start taking place. And as of now, we're expecting it to take 15 months to complete what will be phase 1. In order to really grasp the 9 miles that we would be remediating and then redeveloping, we had to understand the 9 miles first. So between those conversations with local government leaders, community conversations, the field observations on the ground data, and then using all of that combined with our technical experience, both from in-house DEP and our consultant team, we had more data than I thought was possible coming out of this. All of that coupled with listening to thousands of voices. These are a series of pictures from one of our engagement events where people actually could lay out their vision for what the future of the Greenway would be, saying, you know, I want a fast path in this place, and I want stormwater infrastructure here, and a bench here, bike infrastructure in this spot. So people could see and really play with the amount of available space that we had. And then we took all that information to combine it into what would become our plan. In 2023, we had a series of incredible outreach events. That is not to say we stopped in 2023. The graphic for 2024 and 25 just looks significantly less interesting, hence why this is the one I used. But we did a combination of both digital and print outreach, in addition to in person. So we had community workshops, listening sessions, a trail test where we took chalk paint and marked out exactly where, you know, let's put a bike lane here and that bench right here, a water fountain like this. So people could really move through the space and see that as we listened to what they were recommending, they could move through it and feel what it could be like, make some more comments, and it would be an iterative process. Something that was really important to us was also making sure we reached out to the communities that weren't necessarily digital. So we mailed 32,000 postcards to people in the surrounding areas along those 9 miles, offering them the series of opportunities for engagement that we had already scheduled, links to online surveys, and ability to mail in things as well. But all of that work needs to also be grounded in some form of actionable data, right? So we took those 9 miles of the Greenway and divided it into segments. Segments being lengths of the Greenway between potential access points, and very importantly, those segments dramatically vary in length and features. Some are a 1/4 mile long, some are 1.5 miles, depending on how you access them. Some are on the top of ridgeline, some of them cut over the Hackensack River. So wildly different experiences. Then we took our data and we scaled everything from 1 to 5. 1 being more difficult to build or less impactful potentially, 5 being easier to build and more impactful. Those 2 criteria, ease and impact, you can see some of the indices we used. But at the end of the day, like we all know that some places, even if they are very difficult to remediate, also potentially have the biggest impact for the communities that they surround. The stretch that we ultimately picked, which spoiler a little bit, is an area that is surrounded by many, many brownfields. So the potential for us to revitalize this one section had a potential greater impact than revitalizing one lone brownfield somewhere else. Our potential scenarios as we walked through were 4 different ones. So we've got scenario A, easiest to build. Looking at the longest continuous stretch of segments, that would be the easiest. So whether that's the fewest bridges or the fewest complications, the ground is the levelest and didn't require a lot of stormwater considerations, that sort of thing. Highest impact being scenario B. So regardless of how hard it might be, who needs it the most, right? If we have 9 miles running through very different geographies and demographics, so socioeconomic status, everything like that, who needs access to open space? Who needs access the most to clean land? Scenario C then, looking at wow moments, so sort of forgetting all of the data and really just, if we want to make a state asset that's impactful, what's beautiful, what's intriguing, what's unique? Where can we put features along these 9 miles that will really get people to come back and want more to get the rest of it to connect? And of course, being the government, hybrid. Is there a way that we can compromise any of those things to create one scenario that is truly the best? And lo and behold, what did we do? Hybrid. So moving forward, all of that hybrid approach led us to our almost 1 mile stretch for phase 1 running in Newark. I'm incredibly excited about this. It connects on the west side, Branch Brook Park, which is a huge, beautiful county-run park with an excellent cherry blossom festival if you're around. I think it's in a week and a half or 2 weeks. And then running east towards Broadway as our current eastern terminus. Going through there, we've got a quick look into what is leading into our design ideas. So as we had mentioned, this was a former rail line. So wanting to keep the history of the use that it was for decades of time, we really wanted to pull from the actual site itself. So looking at the rail ties, all of the Corten steel that was used, the fact that as a rail line, it carried ice from farther in New Jersey into people's homes pre-fridge and freezer days. And then looking at that, developing a design language that married the conversation between ice, rails, and ties with that interplay of how humans and nature always interact, because you cannot separate the two. With those, we created a series of Greenway experiences, those being connections, overlooks, and community spaces. I'll move into these a little bit closer. So connection is exactly what you think of when you think of a trail. Like, not to put too fine of a point on it, but it takes you from point A to point B. And while there is intention in the design behind it, it is largely the one shared use path for bikes, fast moving people who run significantly faster than me, and then a slower moving path for, where I will be hanging out, walking slowly with my dog. And it's not to say that there isn't other investment. There's stormwater management. There's a reestablishment of local vegetation, flora, fauna, but it is largely a connector. Which brings you to an overlook on our western side. And if you look at the image on the left, that is actually a cantilevered outlook into Branch Brook Park. So from the Greenway off to the side a little bit, you'll be able to look into the park, view the river, see those cherry blossom trees, and appreciate the park from a different vantage point. The purple side are community spaces, of which phase one has two. Tiffany Manor would be that building that Carrie showed towards the beginning, and we heard from tons of local people that they needed a place where they could hang out and grab a coffee with their neighbors, sit down and enjoy the day before it gets started. It's a wonderful little hub of a space that connects a deeply residential area with a local supermarket, a elementary school 1 block off the road, and is incredibly well traveled. Farther east, we have Nork Central Hub, which is by far and away the biggest investment we will put in for the entire of the Greenway. You can see how much wider it gets the farther east you are, and then it substantially narrows again for the rest of the Greenway. So that is our biggest opportunity for all sorts of programming, social, cultural, and recreational. This is our current rendering of Branch Brook Park. You can see that shared use path in the foreground was looking westwards. And if you follow that cyclist forward, she's riding off to what will become the future of the Greenway towards Montclair. She's got about another 4 miles heading in that direction before she hits the western terminus. And then that big Corten steel in the background hugs the slower path where more people will walk. And separating that is just a lawn where people can hang out, kick a ball around, enjoy the day. Then farther in the background, you can see people enjoying sort of the view into the park. Our next rendering, it loads, is of Tiffany Manor. So that iconic building is Tiffany & Co.'s old sterling silver factory. They manufactured silverware there for the longest time, and they've since been converted into lovely residential apartments. I would love to go into that turret. Maybe one day I'll get an invite. But as I'd mentioned, this is an area where residents really wanted a place where they could come and sit down before they start the day or come and take lunch, that sort of thing. And then Nork Central. This is one of many renderings that we have, but I had to pick one. A view of what we've been calling the Great Lawn, and the seating capacity, depending on what studies you're looking at, it either fits, a couple of hundred people or up to a couple of thousand, depending on like if it were a more concert style thing with a stage as well. So think local programming. That could be a Friday night concert series if the city would like, or in the community would like. You could lead yoga classes or just picnic out there with your family all day, which is amazing. But because North Central is so vast, I included a couple more renderings of other things that are happening in the area. Doop, doop, doop. So we have 2 separate play areas, one designed more towards older children, like ages 5 plus, 5 to 12 really is what it's aimed towards. And then younger kids 2 to 5. All of the design features are lovingly, painfully designed to keep in mind that the old rail and ice infrastructure. So that's an old ice tower that we're trying to model off for that climbing feature with slide. There's also connecting those two play areas, a climbable water play feature where kids can redirect water streams and play that sort of way. But all of the climbing blocks themselves are modeled after the ice blocks that the rail line used to take. There's also a series of sports courts, workout stations, an area for a future community garden, picnic grove, restrooms, all that sort of thing. Really, really fun. A lot of thoughtful design. And with that, I will kick it back to you, Carrie, to pass it to someone else. But otherwise, looking forward to chatting afterwards. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you, Julia. By the way, I really love that biplane in the rendering, so can't wait to talk some more about the work you've been doing here at the end. My name is Christine Hassell. I am I'm a landscape architect and Chattahoochee Program Project Manager for the Trust for Public Land. And I just want to say, I want to thank TAB Talks for inviting me here today to talk to you all. So part of my role at Trust for Public Land and my responsibility as a member of the Chattahoochee program team, thank you, is to preserve and activate the Chattahoochee River and its valley from Helen, which is the headwaters of the Chattahoochee River, to Columbus, Georgia. It's 285 miles of river and valley. The Riverlands, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today, is a 100-mile vision that we are working on implementing along the river. It's sort of the metropolitan middle, if you will. And part of, sorry. All right. If you're not familiar with TPL, we are a national nonprofit. Our mission is to create parks and protect land for people, ensuring healthy, livable communities for generations to come. The reason we got started in Georgia is the Chattahoochee River. So our field office was planted here about 30 years ago because the Chattahoochee River at that time was named by American Rivers the most endangered river in the United States. Since we opened our office, we have preserved over 18,000 acres and 80 miles of riverfront along the Chattahoochee. And I will say the river is much cleaner than it was then, in part by the Chattahoochee Riverkeeper, a lot of partners and a lot of activists in our area that really focused in on this neglected resource. So as I mentioned, 285 miles is it's pretty daunting to consider. We have about 2 to 3 people that manage our Chattahoochee program in Georgia. So TPL prioritized our initial efforts into what I mentioned before, the metropolitan middle, 100 miles from Lake Lanier to Chattahoochee Bend State Park. And if you look on the graphic sort of on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the full Chattahoochee River. It actually starts in Helen. It runs 285 miles through Georgia to Columbus, Georgia, and then forms the Georgia-Alabama border and runs all the way down into the Gulf. The study that we did started in 2018 was with partnership with City of Atlanta, Cobb County, and TPL, and some funding from the Atlanta Regional Commission to focus on this 100 miles of the river. It was a $1.5 million study, and it was a 2-year process that got us going. And it was a community-driven process at that, which is extremely important to notate because it was 2 years. But CPL convened a stakeholder group that we call to this day the Chattahoochee Working Group. These folks had a shared vision to activate the Chattahoochee River. It was a bunch of stakeholders. 7 years later, we are still meeting every month. And we now represent about 80 nonprofit planning and government agencies enthusiastically working along the Chattahoochee. This list was our 2020 list, April 2020, of our Chattahoochee Working Group and participating organizations. And it really was amazing that TPL was able to convene all of these groups and get us all talking together. So I mentioned a big community engagement process. 100 miles of the river, we divided up into 3 sub areas based on the region itself, the stakeholders in that group, and sort of what you could identify as some breakpoints along the river itself. But a lot of engagement. We engaged all over the river. We took our team everywhere, met as many people as we possibly could, in person and online. We took groups on tours. We brought some kids to the river that didn't even know that the river was less than a mile away from their house, but they just had no access. So a big public engagement experience along the river for about 2 years. And that got us to identify 4 goals along the Chattahoochee Riverlands. These are our goals: to connect or to create a safe and connected corridor, to create a common ground for all, an ecological refuge for the region, and a living legacy for future generations. And these 4 goals, we informed the vision. It informed the vision then, and they still inform all of the decisions that we are making today during implementation. So what is the Riverlands really? The Riverlands is the Greenway, which is really what I'm here to talk mostly about today. Think of it as a 100-mile linear park, if you will, but it's the Greenway. So this is the trails along the river, one side or the other, sometimes both, and then the destinations that the Greenway creates, that those trails create. The Blue Way, which thanks to the beautiful and Mother Nature, that was actually an easy one to check off of being complete. But the Blue Way is the river itself, a Blue Way trail along the river. The Riverlands identifies more places to access throughout the 100 miles. And then the tributary trails are essentially the trails that get folks from where they live and work to the river to play and recreate. So all of that makes our Chattahoochee Riverlands. This study was published, as I mentioned, in 2020, and the full alignment is 125 miles of trails, 25 river crossings, 44 tributary trails, just a lot of access to this terrific natural resource. And so far today, since the published study in 2020, we have tracked over $267 million that have been invested or committed to the Riverlands projects. And these are 2024 numbers, so we don't even have our any more recent figures, at least not in this version of our beautiful graphic. So I'm going to focus a little bit more now on actually building the Riverlands and getting us closer to seeing this vision realized. As you can imagine, not everybody necessarily can flip through a book or talk about a vision and knows really what that looks like on the ground. So here in Georgia and in the Atlanta metropolitan area, we do talk about the Riverlands trail portion, the Greenways, as the belt line, but on the water. And I just wanted to highlight this map that you're looking at right here. The blue section in the middle is sub-area 2. That is our urban core for the Chattahoochee Riverlands. And then the red arrow that you see right there in the middle, this is the area that Trust for Public Land is most focused on, serving the more underserved areas along the river with kind of what Julia was talking about. It's the highest impact of creating the trail network and park along this section of river. And a lot of these sections are not heavily funded as well. So Trust for Public Land, along with a multitude of partners, are working on this section of the river. And then the City of Atlanta, our terrific partner, We are focused on our Cobb County side, our City of Atlanta side, and some of our jurisdictions a little bit farther south. So this urban core, as I mentioned, it's a large industrial use along this section of the river, very urban, a little gritty. Historically, people turned their back on the river in this area, and most of these industrial sites were just dumping into the river. Essentially that's part of the reason that we ended up having one of the most endangered rivers in the United States. Now, the trend is seeing a lot of these industrial sites turn to residential or amenity or park. So we're seeing a lot of that already happen. But in some areas, there still is a lot of fencing and utility corridors that people cannot access, a lot of rail lines to get across as well, just to get, to the river, which you can see, but you can't actually access. So this is our focus study in the urban area. One of the primary locations that Trust for Public Land has been working in, we call the Riverland Showcase Project. It is about 3 miles of greenway, anchored with a park and trailhead at the north end and a park and trailhead at the southern end that you can see here. And this project will be complete. We are underway. It will be complete in 2026. As I mentioned, it's about 3 miles of trail, paved trail, providing that a sort of access for everyone, so everybody can access the river. And the wonderful thing about this, it runs through Cobb County, City of Smyrna, and Mableton, so connecting 3 jurisdictions directly. And we're able to utilize the utility easements and corridor through a lot of this, which makes it a lot easier to get access through this section of the river and build out beautiful trails. Let's see, as I mentioned, we are looking at sections where we get sort of the highest impact for the investments that we're making. So this showcase is located near 44,000 Metro Atlantans. We've already conserved and activated hundreds of acres of land along this stretch. And we've seen a lot of community volunteerism, bringing them to the river to help us remove invasive species, to talk about the river, to talk about stewardship. But also to help build the investment here in the to date. So far, we have received over $26 million in public funding and a philanthropic investment of $23 million committed by TPL. And again, this project has started opening. So the first section of this opened in December. And this is just sort of the side-by-side of the renderings on the left that we had completed during this visioning and the study. And then you've got the what it looks like in real life. We will be getting new pictures here soon as spring has sprung and things are starting to leaf out, turn green, and we're getting some beautiful flowers. But this is sort of towards the end of construction. But you can see this split trail. So where the easement runs through the middle, and we needed to provide access to utilities, the trail sort of divides with wheels on one side and heels on the other. So dividing the uses a little bit. Let's see, and then just some more photos where the trail comes together. This is actually a bridge in the top right, and actually through most of these photos. And you can see the boardwalk that actually runs over the wetland that is also being restored at this site as part of that ecological refuge for the region. These are some renderings of the trail that's going to be coming online south of the section that just opened. And as you can see, the trail on the riverfront side and a lot of these industrial uses on the backside of where these trails will be. Working through easements and access with a lot of really terrific partners. And I think there's one more rendering, and then I will jump. Yeah, so again, you can see sort of the division of wheels and heels here. All right, so I'm going to turn your attention to the other side of the river, which is Atlanta's waterfront. TPL is working with the City of Atlanta and a lot of other partners to make progress on Atlanta's 5 miles of riverfront, which has been called the Atlanta Reach. This map shows just the extensive thinking that we have going into all these different trail segments and pieces and access along the river. And I will highlight the top right. You see standing Peachtree green space. That's sort of the northern access point for this section of trail through the city of Atlanta. TPL has been actively working there to provide the city of Atlanta with first ever access to the Chattahoochee River, which opened up last year, but extensive trail through these areas. And as you can imagine, a lot of old industry and a lot of brownfields along this section. If you follow these trails along the river corridor, sort of right to left, top right to bottom left, you hit Lower Paul Avenue Park, Braden Deeds, which Jessica will talk about a little bit more, Chattahoochee Brick as well, and then the Proctor Creek area, which is was identified in the study as a tributary trail, and there's a lot of activity there as well. And then moving farther south through the city of Atlanta riverfront. So I just want to highlight quickly, if I can, I'll try and get through these slides. Again, the Atlanta Reach trail design is underway for this 5 miles. Very excited to see this moving forward. Standing Peachtree, as I mentioned, this is so looking from the river up Peachtree Creek, which is this is the confluence of the river and Peachtree Creek, and you can see the city skyline in the background. And the kayak launch, and then the trails that are coming online in the near future. That will be a bridge over Peachtree Creek connecting residents of the city of Atlanta to the riverfront. And I just wanted some before and after photos because we really love these, right? Beyond the vision and the renderings, to be able to see the before and after. On the left side, there was just no, you didn't even know the creek was there. There was no way to get to it except for a sort of terrifying scramble down some large granite boulders, again, here on the left. And now we have a fully accessible kayak launch. So again, sort of that connecting everyone and making sure that everyone has access to the outdoors and to the river via this access, no matter your age, your ability, your race. This really gets everybody down to the water or in the water if you want to be in a paddle, a boat or a canoe. And then again, just sort of this trail looking down and then the city of Atlanta behind. Quite a lovely groundbreaking we were able to have in December as well. So I just sort of jumped to the southern end, which I mentioned the Chattahoochee Brick, and Carrie was nice enough to highlight that a little bit in her introduction. But if the river sort of reorients you, the river is on the north side, Proctor Creek running through the river. That's 285 is the main roadway that you see driving through there with Chattahoochee Brick in the top left. So it's a really important site. Again, you're seeing this confluence of a tributary trail, a waterway that meets the Chattahoochee River. And then I think Jessica's going to dive a little bit more, but just some of the original engagement that we did as a part of the study back in 2018 on the Chattahoochee Brick site. And a little bit more just sort of existing conditions of some of the vacant buildings in the area along that Proctor Creek Greenway stretch, the railroad crossing, and then the rendering of, again, so now we flipped it from how I first oriented you to the site. The river is at the bottom. That's 285, that's sort of running bottom to top. And then Proctor Creek snaking through with a bunch of trails and a beautiful rendering of just what we can really do with these sites and this great partnership that Trust for Public Land and the city of Atlanta have been able to create. So I just want to highlight again some of the, this is the last rendering I'll show and I'll pass it off to Jessica, but Really, the Chattahoochee Riverlands, we see it as on track to become one of Georgia's defining public spaces in the state for generations to come, really drawing a regional audience to this area and connecting millions of people with a vital natural resource. And so greenways along 100 miles of the river, it's going to be quite lovely. We would not be able to do what we're doing without the amazing partnerships that we have. And I'm going to hand it off to Jessica, as she has been truly a terrific partner in making progress on this.
Thank you so much. My name is Jessica Lavandier. I work with the City of Atlanta Department of City Planning and the Office of Zoning and Development, and I manage the Brownfield program. And let me see if I can move this down. All right. So as I mentioned, I manage several EPA grants, Brownfield grants, revolving loan fund, where we provide financing for brownfield remediation by providing a loan or a sub-grant to remediate a parcel. The assessment grants, where we conduct a phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessment and cleanup planning for parcels. And then a cleanup grant, which is for a site that's owned by the city, in this case, our Chattahoochee brick site. One thing I'll have to say about brownfield remediation is it takes a long time. So I was going to highlight a rail project real quick before we move into our Chattahoochee River parcels. So I'm still not having a hard time. Okay, there we go. So this is just to give you a little background with some of the assessments that we have conducted, have led or will lead to the creation of 370 acres of parks and open space. So that's been a real big focus. And it also has led to the construction of about 11 miles of trails. All of that always starts with planning. So in the 1990s, the Rails Trails Conservancy worked with a lot of partners throughout the region to identify rail corridors that could be eligible for Rails to Trails conversion. And I wanted to say the City of Atlanta has really developed along the rail line, not so much along a river like a lot of other cities throughout the country, but it's really grown along the rail line. And there was 10 segments of rails that circled the city that was called the Circle Line. And it wasn't used as much as the other rails. So that was a good candidate for that Rails to Trails conversion. And that was incorporated in our Parks and Green Space and Trail Plan, and later on into the Beltline Redevelopment Plan. And an agency was created to implement, to build the 22 miles of trails around the city. So with our program, our Brownfield program was starting around the same time. So we did a lot of work along the Beltline. So I have 3 projects to focus on to show you. And if you could go, so this is with our revolving loan fund, we worked with the Atlanta Beltline to remediate this 2.3 mile rail corridor that had some contamination from the operations as the rail operations. So you could see the before and after, and it's a really widely used trail. So it's been open for almost a decade, and it's really packed on the weekends. The next one is a gas station. So we conducted a phase 2 environmental assessment on a gas station and an auto repair shop. And we removed 3 tanks, fuel the lines, conducted sampling underneath in the soil, and did the closure report and received a no further action letter so that this parcel could be used as an access point from the neighborhood to the Beltline, which is located below grade. And, some things take a long time. So we did this work in 2016. And finally, the Atlanta Beltline is opening this access point this spring. So I'm really excited to finally see this site redeveloped. The next one is a rail corridor the CSX abandoned. And the City of Atlanta purchased it and worked with the Beltline and the Path Foundation, which is a nonprofit that builds trail. So we conducted the phase 2. There was the largest phase 2 I've worked on, and it's a 31-acre rail corridor, which was challenging because some of it is elevated and some of it is below the street level. And the Path Foundation built the and opened the trail in 2021. So we have some before and afters here. So now I'm going to focus on the Chattahoochee River. So the Chattahoochee River is really inaccessible to most people in the Atlanta region. And we've had many plans over decades on trying to improve access to the river. And this one is from 1994. This was a partnership with the city of Atlanta and Fulton County on a 12-mile corridor. And we partnered with PATH and Trust for Public Land even back then. And there were several key recommendations on how to improve access. And one of the recommendations was to build the demonstration project, which included a 1-mile segment in a new park along the river. So the demonstration part was built, and this is the 1-mile segment of trail that was built along a City of Atlanta water treatment facility. It was closed for a while, but now we are reopening that segment. So it was being refurbished here. And then the next one is the Whittier Mill Park, which was a 22-acre site where a former cotton mill was located, and it's adjacent to the Chattahoochee River. So that park is there. Another plan that I worked on was a partnership between Cobb County and City of Atlanta along the Hollowell corridor, state highway. And the boundary for both is the Chattahoochee River. So we saw that as a place where we both could come together. This was funded by the Atlanta Regional Commission, which is our 10-county planning agency. So the plan recommends parks and trails and pedestrian bridges over the Chattahoochee River. So years later, we applied with TPL and Cobb County on a planning study to look at how to bring that park and trail into reality, and we expanded the scope beyond the study area to that 100-mile corridor. The idea of a Chattahoochee trail and park is also in our parks plan, our Activate ATL from 2021. The city of Atlanta is a very forested city, and we seek to protect 50% of the city with a tree canopy. So we're trying to protect our natural areas and also protect the wildlife habitat. We also want to have a more extensive trail connections to bring people from whether they live and work to a park. And we also want to increase accessibility by having a 10-minute walk. So all of those are important elements in our that come together in our Chattahoochee River Atlanta Reach project. So I'm going to focus a little bit more about brownfields. So in our grants, we have target areas where we invest EPA grant funds, and one of them is our Groundwork Atlanta. The Groundwork Atlanta has the frontage on the Chattahoochee River, and with one of our assessment grants, we did a survey of potential brownfield sites along in that groundwork, and we identified several that you see here in the map, and several of them are along the Chattahoochee River. So I'm going to talk about 3 specific brownfield projects in the Atlanta Reach, as they're highlighted here. The first one is our Paul Avenue Park. So this was a parcel that is or 2 parcels that are part of a future park. And a couple of decades ago, a company, an industrial operation, dumped its barrels with contamination on the site and contaminated the soil. When the conservation fund is our partner in acquisition of parcels that will become parks and open space. As part of their assessment, they identified lead and chromium contamination, and we provided them with a grant to remediate the soil, and they excavated 800 tons of soil. And here you can see some of the crushed drums that were excavated. And as something that I've realized, that sometimes the contamination is more extensive than originally identified through assessment, but we were able to remove that and clean it up to residential standards so it could be used for the park, its future park use. This shows the vision for the Paul Avenue Park. So this is right near the Chattahoochee River, and we had extensive flooding in 2009, and several residential parcels were flooded. So the idea was to purchase those homes and create this new 6-acre park. So after the site was remediated, Park Pride, which is a park nonprofit, worked with the neighborhood on this visioning with trails, creek restoration, playground, and also they provided funding to Groundwork Atlanta to start the construction of some of those park elements. So we're excited to see this come to reality. The next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Chattahoochee Brick Company. So in the 1885, or in the 1880s, this company, Chattahoochee Brick, located along the Chattahoochee River because it had clay and water that was needed for the production of brick, but also was along the rail line. So all the materials it needed and the bricks that were built could be shipped to their destinations. Right after Reconstruction, a lot of southern states and municipalities started passing laws that criminalized behavior that wasn't criminal prior to that. So a lot of people were being arrested and convicted of crimes, and they were fined. And when they couldn't pay their fines, a company would pay the fine, and in return, the person would have to work at that industrial operation. So it's called the convict leasing system. And in the Chattahoochee Brick, the owner owned thousands of leases. So about 175 to 200 people worked on the Chattahoochee Brick, and they produced 200,000 bricks per day, which was an enormous quantity. There were a lot of investigations because of the mistreatment, the abuse, and malnourishment of workers. And in the end, 2009, the state of Georgia abolished that convict leasing system and then went to this, what they call free labor. So they paid for people to work there. So this is a part of our history that we know very little. We're all learning more about it. And that's in part due to a book that was written by a Georgia State professor, Doug Blackman, and it's called Slavery by Another Name. So they really go into a lot of the industrial uses throughout the South that use this system. But anyways, the Chattahoochee Brick Company closed in 2012, and they demolished all the buildings and put that for sale. But I wanted to show you a little bit about the site. So here you can see the Chattahoochee Brick in this brownish colored one overlooking the river. Woodyer Mill is on the other side. So it was really on a hill with the Proctor Creek floodplain on the south side. And in one picture, the more black and white, you can see there was about 35 feet difference in elevation. And the Proctor Creek floodplain there is in cultivation. So, but there were, one thing about Chattahoochee Brick, there were 4 different generations of brick building over the years. And so there was a lot of activity and there was a lot of wasted brick. And all of that material, most of that material is probably still on the site. So in the next slide, you'll see that this was a big change in the footprint. They did a big expansion and built 300 square feet of new building. In order to do that, they removed the trees and brought enough fill to fill that Proctor Creek floodplain so that it would be level. So about 35 feet of fill, rerouted Proctor Creek. You can see the construction of 285 there. And then you can see the Chattahoochee River. So it was a big change in there. So let's see if you can move to the next slide. So as I said, the Chattahoochee Brick Company closed, and all the buildings were demolished, and they put the property up for sale. So Lincoln Terminal in 2016 proposed to build a truck-to-rail terminal with fuel tanks, with those large bulk fuel storage facilities, and they needed a use permit from the city of Atlanta. There was a lot of opposition to this, and it was the city council turned that down, and they took the city to court, and they lost. So years later, they negotiated with Norfolk Southern to build another facility, what they called their thoroughbred bulk transfer facility, so they could transfer commodities between between rail, truck, and pipeline, and they proposed to build this facility. And they said, well, we're the railroads. We don't need the city of Atlanta permit to build this facility. We could do it as of right. The city of Atlanta challenged their claim that they could do that. At the same time, there was a lot of opposition. The neighbors wanted to see a park, as many of the plans that we have to date recommended the land along the Chattahoochee to be a park. And in addition, there was people were more aware of the convict leasing. So we wanted to honor the memory of the people that suffered under that system. So we opposed this, the redevelopment of the site, and Norfolk Southern relented and eventually stopped their project. But during their redevelopment, they did do a lot of environmental assessments. So they identified what they call 4 areas of concern. So 2 of the areas were where there was a lot of the brick operation, one along that ravine that I think they probably disposed of a lot of their waste along that ravine. And the 2 largest areas of concern are the floodplain. So a lot of the fill that was brought into the floodplain had a lot of contaminants in there. One thing that is pretty uniform is the lead is what we call the driver constituent. So we're cleaning for lead, even though there are a lot of other contaminants present throughout the site. So they started the remediation, and I think at the next slide you'll see that they entered the site into the Georgia Brownfield program and started the remediation. And in the middle of that, they decided to abandon the project and sell to the city, but they continued with some of the remediation. And in the end, they removed 17,000 tons of soil, mainly the first foot, and then put 1 foot of clean fill. The other thing is they intended to keep all of those building foundations there, acting as a cap to the contaminants on the site. So then later on, the city was able to purchase the site. We had a big ceremony. This is our council member at that, noting that we fought the railroad, the fossil fuel industry, and prevailed. And now the vision is for that site to be a park and memorial. So it's 75 acres, and 55 acres of that is in the floodplain. Most of it in the Proctor Creek floodplain, and then there's 2,000 feet of Chattahoochee River frontage. This was purchased by the Conservation Fund, and then the city bought it from them. The city had just passed a park bond in May, and in August we were able to purchase that site. During that due diligence, we had an EPA assessment grant, and we did the phase 1 and the phase 2. As part of that purchase, we entered the site into the Brownfield program, the city as a prospective purchaser, and we have our deadline to do the remediation by June 2026. So that is underway. With the work that we did, the assessment, we were able to prepare and submit an EPA Brownfield grant funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and it was selected for an award. So we have a $2 million cleanup grant. The EPA Deputy Administrator, Janet McCabe, visited the site in August, and we were there to tell our story about why this is so important for us. So we are working to clean it up to the type 5 standard, which means that a lot of that fill will remain in place, but the topsoil will be, the first foot of contamination will be removed, and we'll have a 1 foot cap, and then we'll have a soil management plan to guide any future redevelopment or construction on the site. So we still have a lot of work to do. So you'll see that we were fortunate to be able to get all of the sampling data that was done and reevaluate that to compare it to our residential and non-residential standards, and look at develop a cleanup plan so we can transform that site from an industrial use to a park use. So this is what we're working on. Our sampling plan is coming up next. That we have, I wanted to talk to you about this other parcel. This is the Braden Deed site, is what we call it. And this was also part of Chattahoochee Brick. It's immediately adjacent to it. and it's north of the Whittier Mill site. So it's a 20-acre parcel. And one thing you can see is that Chattahoochee Brick Company obtained its clay by digging, along the river. So there are a lot of what looks like lakes, but those are areas that were dug up for removal of clay. And you can see that in this 1955 area of the site. In 1970, the Chattahoochee Brick removed all of the trees and then again brought in a lot of fill, put a 1 foot of clean soil, and then just let the trees come through. This site is bound by the river and 2 rail lines, so it's very difficult to access. So we're doing a lot of work to, that due diligence at this point. So one of the things we looked at in we did the phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessment. And in the next slide, you'll see we looked at the topo maps from this is a view from the site. You'll see if you walk this site, there's a lot of debris, a lot of tires, trash, industrial looking things on the ground, but it also has a really nice views along the river. So we're really trying to overcome that so that it could be used as a park. But this, we looked at the topos from the 20s before the fill, and then the topos now, and we estimated that about almost 230,000 cubic yards of fill was brought to the site with contaminants mixed in. So it's a really challenge for us. So these are, we did, the owner did an assessment, and then we've done additional assessment, and this just shows the sampling locations where we have exceedances for residential and non-residential standards. So as part of this, we met with EPD. You'll see in the next slide where we are looking on what are the next steps are, and they want additional information to help us determine what the cleanup plan would be. So right now, we're working to install 7 groundwater monitoring wells and 25 additional samples along the border to determine if the contaminants go beyond the parcel boundaries. One thing is hard, and I have to give it to the environmental team, that it's very difficult to get rigs there. So most of this is hand augering. And with hand augering, you can only go like 5 feet. So, but it's a lot of hand augering. But we're working with bringing a walk behind rig for these 7 sites. They have to be 20 to 30 feet deep. So we're working on that. So we have a lot of other additional sites that we haven't even started, but to make our Chattahoochee Riverlands Atlanta Reach vision, these are some of the other sites that we'll be hopefully working in the future. One is this 14-acre parcel that was used for paperboard manufacturing, and it's now used for concrete recycling. And it also has a frontage on the Chattahoochee River. And then the next slide, you'll see the city of Atlanta has the incinerator, municipal solid waste incinerator, that's been vacant for many years, but this is one of our key trailheads for the riverfront park. So people will be able to park and use and have park facilities. And another side is a 70-acre area between the river and an industrial park, a more modern industrial park that is impacted by contaminated fill. So we have a lot of work to do in our future. We have more information about our Chattahoochee Brick site on this webpage, and then information about our Atlanta Brownfield program, and then my contact information. So I'll pass it on to Carrie, and we can answer your questions.
Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you, Jessica. I'm just checking the chat right now to see if we have any questions. Okay, so Ed would like to know, who are y'all connecting private partners to help? So how are private partners involved in your work, if at all?
You guys want to take that? Or you want me to go? Go for it, Christine. You go first.
So Trust Public Land is, I mean, we have such an extensive organization across the country, and we are working all over with public and private partners. We have a really solid philanthropy team too that is constantly working on building relationships with private partners as well, and not just on, you know, the Riverlands work that we're doing, Chattahoochee program, but specific to Georgia, specific to the Southeast, and then nationally as well. And then just an extensive group of, I mean, the list of partners that we have is so extensive, and we would not be able to do a thing without them. But the best way to, if there's interest, is to reach out to me, and I can connect you if you're looking for any partnerships. And I can also expand on that if you want to, if you have more questions offline, please do connect with me. I should add too, let me go ahead and say, we provide tours as well for our Chattahoochee program. For folks that are interested, we do tours of before and after. So we didn't really have much of an after until December when we opened the showcase in Standing Peachtree. But we do walk some of these sites, both sides of the river, usually in our along the showcase, and then along the City of Atlanta side, Whittier Mill, and some of the other sites that Jessica talked about, with the exception of Chattahoochee Brick, because that is a park and holding for City of Atlanta, and you have to go through City of Atlanta for any of those types of tours. But if you are interested in learning more or seeing it firsthand, even before it's built, we do provide tours to everyone, to public partners, private partners, elected officials, you name it.
I think this question is specifically, actually, World Cup games are going to be in New Jersey and Atlanta, right? Yeah. Okay, so it's for everyone. Oh, well, this might be for Chattahoochee, but the question is, will the 3 miles of trail along the river be opened by the World Cup? But I guess for everyone, what are your World Cup plans? And have you thought about how recreational opportunities for tourists, potentially international tourists for the World Cup, would be integrated? Or have you thought of that?
So in the City of Atlanta, we're working on the 1 mile segment of trails to be open. So it will start at the Camp and Paddle Trail, which is City of Atlanta Park. And so there'll be a bridge over Peachtree Creek. And then that 1 mile demonstration trail that I showed from years ago that's being refurbished, that's part of that 1 mile demonstration trail. I have to say that the Path Foundation is also extending its Silver Comet Trail, which is a big rails trail to come over the Chattahoochee and connect to that. So it'll be that 1 mile trail will be more connected into the existing trail network.
Let me add on that the trail in Cobb County, that Cobb Showcase site, and I'm sure that we will have another section open before the World Cup, but honestly, our deadline is to have it open by the end of 2026. So we'll see. That it does include Riverlands Gateway Park as well, which is the big southern anchor of that site.
I tried answering this and I closed another question in the chat, so I'm so sorry. I'm trying to answer you at least via text. But our World Cup plans are vast and intense. The Greenway does not actually touch it. Rather, our Liberty State Park in Jersey City, one of our largest state parks, and our definitively largest urban state park, is hosting so many things, fan fest and craziness and general happiness. It'll be a lot, but hopefully good. NJ Transit, one of our sister agencies, is working on not active transportation, but how people can circulate between the Meadowlands and Fan Fest and things like that. So we've been working with them how to cross some of our state lands, and make some of those bus transfers, train transfers a little bit more seamless, because we'll be moving so many people. But it'll be really cool, and hope to see you at Liberty.
Awesome. So yes, so now I'll transfer over to the chat, which I think, Julia, you were trying to answer. But I'll verbalize it for our collective. What would you say is the biggest or most common obstacle when it comes to community engagement for these kinds of properties? And to follow that, how would you recommend approaching such obstacles?
Yeah, I'll just start reading what I started typing back to you, and then delete it. So one of our largest obstacles was engaging folks that aren't already engaged. It's really easy to keep the conversation going with people who care a lot about this area, who have been invested for years, but trying to reach the voices that didn't get on the bandwagon 15 years ago is significantly harder to do, particularly when local communities that the Greenway runs through are so diverse. There is no one size fits all approach to how we can approach community engagement for the Greenway. So we've done pop-ups at our light rail stations. Along the way, we've hosted events at public libraries, we've gone to farmers markets, we did open houses at elementary schools after school dismissal, so people could catch us on their way out, picking up their kids. We've tried so many different approaches, like hanging out in parks and flyering and just wanting to talk to people and handing out popsicles, sort of thing. I think it's hard to say it, but the more ideas and perspectives you can get for how to approach those conversations is the better. Because at some point it feels like you're just throwing spaghetti at a wall to see what'll stick, who will show up to some event and actually talk to you. But eventually some of the spaghetti will stick and you'll get those voices. And you'll be able to then keep them engaged, and they'll tell their neighbors, and the word of mouth is really fantastic. I also can't underemphasize the role that our local partners have played in this, from nonprofits, boots on the ground, getting the word out, to even the local store owners. We showed up to a bike shop in Newark completely unannounced, and we're just like, you want to talk about this thing that we're building? And then they sent it out to all their customers, which was really cool. So trying to figure out different approaches to talk to new people, but staying at it even when it's frustrating.
Julia, I think you hit one of the nails right on the head, and I can't wait to connect with you a little bit more after this about strategies and how they worked for you. But ultimately, it's identifying obstacles for people to get to engagement. So childcare is one of them, transportation is one of them, especially in the Atlanta metropolitan area. We do not have really terrific public transportation. So identifying what some of those obstacles are, and those are just a few of the many. Identifying what those obstacles are and trying to figure out what the solutions are to get past those. Sometimes it's even as simple as like, I just want to see somebody that looks like me on the other side of the table. So identifying the obstacles, I will say at Trust for Public Land, we have gotten some funding to have 3 core fellows, which are community outreach resident expert fellowships at 3 different sites and across the country, which was tricky. And we really pleaded to have one in our Georgia office, and her name is Jordan Wright. She works on our program team at the Chattahoochee program team. And we have just been working to get her a little bit more embedded in the community in which she lives, so that she's bringing that integrity of TPL and the work that we're doing to the community, so that when we are there, there is a little bit more credibility, and also helping to break down the barriers. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as like, maybe there is a neighbor that is willing to do a potluck and we can show up and have a meal with the neighbors, because really some of the best ideas can come from like just sharing a meal and sharing a conversation. So again, this is sort of some of the solutions that we're identifying, because we know what the obstacles are to get people out and talking to us and comfortable. And one of the other things that's been really tricky, I must say, is people being over-engaged because there are multiple community engagement processes that are taking place on a variety of different fronts for a variety of different projects. So trying to work with other groups that may already be trying to engage with the community or who already are, and being able to sort of work together rather than say, well, they have one on Tuesday and we have one on Thursday and we hope you come to both. So lots of strategies. No, as Julia said, she sort of hit it on the head too. There's really no like perfect way to do it. No one easy answer.
Awesome. And I think this is going to be our last question. We are a little bit over time. And yeah, I want to thank everybody, but if you will answer this one question, and thank you everybody for staying on. If you can stay on. This is absolutely love the Atlanta infrastructure of neighborhood planning units. Could you speak more about that engagement avenue as well as the other partners in the working group? So I guess like Jessica, if you could speak to the ways that you would engage the different neighborhood planning units in the city, and then Christine, how you gathered the working group, and then Julia, is there once you hear their answers, is there a similar corollary in New Jersey?
So I'll start in 50 years ago. The mayor formed the neighborhood planning unit. So the city of Atlanta has about 250 neighborhoods, and they're grouped into 24 neighborhood planning units created by the city. They meet once a month to talk about planning issues. So any planning activity that is undertaken by the city of Atlanta planning department, that is our, foundational or the structure that we go to. We engage with the neighborhood planning units for all activities that we do. So when I was applying for the cleanup grant, or when we have the assessment grant, we always reach out to the neighborhood planning unit. We present there often. We have steering committees for planning activities. We reach out to the neighborhood planning units to nominate somebody to be part of their steering committee. We notify them of any event that we have. We seek their input. So they're, embedded in any kind of community engagement process that we do. So they've been engaged previously and they'll be engaged in the future. So one thing I have to say, for example, that special administrative permit, that Lincoln Terminal, that went before the NPU for a vote. That's how they became aware of that, and they voted to deny it, and they, mounted that grassroots effort to defeat that. So, so they're involved, and they will continue to be involved in the planning efforts on the Chattahoochee Brick and all of the other activities. I also reach out to the neighborhoods themselves. For example, Whittier Mill is close to the both locations, so we'll be engaging them throughout the process.
And I'll speak to the Chattahoochee Working Group a little bit. So Chattahoochee Working Group was actually formed before I joined TPL by the Chattahoochee Program Director, Walt Ray. When he started at TPL to really sort of identify how TPL was going to move forward with creating public spaces along the Chattahoochee River and leading to that Riverland study, he started reaching out to public partners first, so multiple jurisdictions along the river, trying to connect with who's working on the river. And it started with the little questions like, okay, Parks Department for Cobb County, who is it that's actively looking at what's happening along the river? And then, pointed in several different directions. And following sort of the breadcrumb trail along and all of the different paths that it took him down. And he realized that there was a lot of understanding of sort of what other jurisdictions were doing between each other, but not really like one place where they were all communicating together. So as Walt was having all of these conversations sort of one-on-one, he would meet with a community that was across the river from another community who was doing very similar work, but they weren't talking to each other. So that's how he really formed the Chattahoochee Working Group, was to get all of the people like-minded, working sort of towards the same trajectory in a room together so that they could talk together about what they're doing and be a shared resource for each other. And since then it's grown. So all of our local jurisdictions, it is 20 cities and 7 counties along the full 100 miles. Public and private partnership is sort of embedded that as well. So, and then, I mean, everyone from Chattahoochee River Keeper to Georgia Rivers, Birds, Georgia, I know I'm going to leave out so many, the Conservation Fund, and I apologize in advance for whoever sees this, and I have left you off this list. Groundwork Atlanta, Trees Atlanta, but a number of partners, Path Foundation, and we're all just sort of embedded. We don't allow consultants into the room because it is not for people to mind work. It is for people to feel like it's a safe space to share. And it is everything from project successes to the things that maybe didn't go so well, and just sort of using that hive mind to make progress along the Chattahoochee, sort of with a collective resource.
That's super cool. We do not yet have something like that. Greenway is much farther back in terms of all of the things than the other projects you've heard about today. But we are in the works trying to figure out what is that ongoing high-level strategic guidance we need. What is the partnerships we need? I think, and I think most people would say, that DEP has done a pretty good job of engaging with local organizations, nonprofits, local politicians, county, state, et cetera, regional planning authorities, that sort of thing. And there is always room for improvement. Moreover, I think there's room to formalize that process. So a lot of what we've been doing is, for better or worse, building the plane as we fly it, and trying to just make sure that something keeps running. We're moving ahead as full steam as fast as possible. But along the way, there are definitely these holes that we'll double back to start filling in on. And as I mentioned, just formalizing some of the partnerships that we've been working on so far.
These were incredible projects. I'm very excited to take advantage of both of them.